Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Florian Kemmerich, and he is an author, an investor, and also a purpose-driven educator. We'll learn from him about how to move from achievement-driven careers to lives of meaningful contribution. We'll dive into his seven-step vocating framework, the role of tools like Ikigai and Enneagram, and why, especially in the age of AI, discovering your vocation is no longer a luxury, but a necessity for true success and impact. Welcome to the show, Florian.
Thank you, AJ, for having me here. I'm excited about our conversation and looking very much forward to.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Florian. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about how one can align themselves with purpose, their purpose with their profession. So we'll talk about all this. But before that, let's talk a bit about your journey, your background, so that the audience knows who they are listening to.
Yes, so I'm based in Geneva. I'm originally from the southern part of Germany. I grew up at the Swiss border, so my roots are German, Swiss, and Danish. So Central European in a sense. And in my early stage, when I was a younger person, I was bullied and pushed and aggravated by some people. And that's why my parent put me into judo classes to toughen up and to defend myself. And I did this then for a long period of time and went up to be a part of the national team in Germany, the Bundesliga, competing internationally. But that wasn't my calling. It was just for me a reaction, to basically a root cause. And then at the age of 18, I said, okay, I would not continue with the judo career, even though I was prepared to go into an Olympics. But I decided to stop that and wanted to become a stand-up comedian because I've created a band. I love to entertain people. And for me, that was part of how to numb out my pain, is to entertain. I still love that until today. But my father at its time said, maybe before you going for an artist profession, there are a lot of artists out there not making a living. Maybe you want to study something normal first. So I studied the normal in business administration and marketing. I went into a job at a healthcare group and then climbed up the ladder for many years. And at the age of 33, I had the success my parents would be wishing I'd have. I was running a company, having a family and a house. And then at the age of 33, and I said, okay, now what is it the next 33 years I will do? Is it a bigger company, a bigger house, a bigger family? And I was actually asking myself that I'm living not my life, I'm living a life, the life successfully. And that's when I had a pivot moment and I said, hold a second, I actually don't know who I am. So I had a pivot, leaving the corporate job, going into personal development methodologies to learn about myself, because I found out that I've been the absent subject of my own education. My education has given me the tools to make a living, not the tools to live my life how I would like to do. And so that was then a pivot into a roller coaster life, which ended up where what I'm doing today is impact investing, where we use capital as a force for good. Yeah, it's basically you resolve issues, you focus on economic empowerment by the so-called impact investing. But this is where basically I come from. What I do today from a living perspective is to do impact investing. My leitmotif is impact lives and share profits. But that also through that path then led me to write a book called On Vocation, How to Align Your Purpose with Your Profession.
Absolutely, Florian. So to understand it better in today's time, a lot of people are, generally trying to have some sort of a job, live their life, as much as possible, bring food to their tables in whatever way they can. So when you talk about aligning purpose with profession, In today's time, a common person can either think of purpose or either think of getting a job, especially in the times of AI. Is it a relevant subject in today's time to talk?
It is, and it's actually a component of my second book. I'm just finishing because at the end it will be 3 books, which is the On Vocation trilogy. The first one is aligning purpose with profession. So it's how you take your life, not only on a professional journey, but also you on a journey which is bigger than you. The second is how to align your purpose with your business, how to do that in an organization. Yeah, and the third one is actually then we'll be talking about the capital, how to align your purpose with capital. But it's a great question, AJ, because our fundamental flaw is that first you need money and then you give back. And that's a fundamental psychological flaw. So first parents, I would saying, I'm worried my children have to sustain life. They have to make an earning. Yeah, so that's my primary focus. And when you have a younger person saying, oh, but I have this cause and but you want to do this later, like my father, with me thinking about becoming a stand-up comedian, and said, can you maybe talk about that later? And so it was shelved because first you need to have a job and earn money so you can have a family and you can sustain life. And that is the problem, that we see purpose as a do-good, maybe philanthropy, something giving back, and that is fundamentally wrong. Purpose is something you build. Purpose is something you can actually build a job on top and do something about it. And that's what I invite people. So I've had a lot of people coming to me saying, Florian, you do impact. How can I do impact? And my question is, what's your vocation? And generally they say, I don't know. So I gave them exercises to figure their vocation out. And the vocation, not somebody telling you that's your vocation, it has to come inside out. That changes everything when it's your own journey. That's what you want to do. And sometimes I ask people saying, okay, at your deathbed, other than having had a juicy bank account and a nice family, what's your contribution to the world? What's your legacy? Yeah, and this is where things trigger. And you shouldn't ask yourself that question when you are 50 and you've made it and economically you're fine and you have some years left and you think about, oh, what's my legacy? You should think that early on when you're young to say, okay, that's my life. And how do I want to live my life? And how can I by making a living, actually contribute and do something larger than that? This is the gist and the discussion about what I call vocating. Yeah, if you build your vocation and you dedicate yourself professionally to your vocation, you are vocating, which means that the cause you after professionally making a living is contributing to humanity and to the planet.
Absolutely. Let's understand it this way. You talk about aligning your purpose with your profession. Which is more easy, aligning purpose with profession or aligning profession with purpose? Because then you'll not need to make too many changes. How does that work? Which is easy?
Okay, that's actually a great question. I didn't have that one before, AJ. This is a good question. So if you think about, oh, this is my profession, and let's see how can my profession be purposeful, that's a way to do. But then it's an outside perspective. It's an opportunistic aspect. It's very different. You say, okay, what is the root cause? What's the cause I really want to solve for? And how can I now develop a theory of change with that purpose? And on top of that, the next step is how can I enter in a sector or community? Yeah. And then on the fourth step of my book is actually then how can you, then you can do your personal, professional business plan. That's very different if something comes from inside out than just opportunistically looking into something. Oh, I happen to do this business. Maybe I can do some CSR here. I can do some donation there, which are nice to have, but it's not genuine because it should come the other way. And why I'm stating that? Because one of the steps I mentioned in my book is actually for you to think big. To think big about others, not about yourself. It shouldn't be your primary goal for you to be successful, for your image, and your financial profit. It should be actually the opposite. That's because if you do something from inside out, the benefit you have, you are up to a challenge. You are not up to a stress externally routed, because life will be hard and life will be unforeseen, and you have to deal with things. But if it's a genuine path of something you want to resolve for, you are in your zone, it's greater than you, and it's all worth it, even though it's hard, rather than being, anxiety economically or health-wise or certain things which might happen to you, then it's a negative stress, which will be detrimental to your health. So therefore, it's a great question, AJ, that yes, you can look at it opportunistically, which is nice, and it might feed your ego, but it's very different if you ask yourself what you want to resolve for, and then you just see actually how to make it happen.
Absolutely, Florian. So to understand it for a common person, they may have heard it before, but I want to get your understanding for them. Vocation, vocating. On your screen also, on vocation. What does this all mean for a common man? How should they understand? They understand vacation better than vocation.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's where the word smithing comes. It's better to be on vocation than on vacation. Yeah, because on vacation, you take a break from normal life, which is, you're tired, I need to recharge, and I need a break. That is vacation. On vocation, when you're on vocation, you're in your zone. A job is not just a job. It's greater than your mission. Yeah, and this is something, it can be as ordinary. Look, if you are, let's say, a teacher, but you ended up to be a teacher because you want to do something else, and teacher is fine and you're good in teaching, it is not your vocation, most likely, you will look for vacation to have your breaks and get rid of the pupils and the students and need a break, and I might have problems also, psychologically around that, which is very different to someone having a vocation saying, this is it. I love to teach. I love to do the ripple effect. I love to. So the job is the same. The skill set might be the same, but the motivation is very different, and you can apply that to being a chef in cuisine. If you don't have a vocation, it's a rough working hours, when everybody is having a nice dinner and the weekend, you work. So only if it's really your vocation, then you enjoy the whole journey. And that's where the confusion very often comes between what I call an image, imagination, and intuition. That's in my sense. I love to play music. I'm a hobby musician. I have my band, but I don't care if there are many people standing in front or not, because I love to play music. If I would have said, okay, my dream is to become a rock star is imagination. It's a fantasy. And even though someone reaches, will not be happy, and you can see that a lot of artists are struggling actually, with drugs and mental health and problems. So it's a really fine line. But if you are on a vocation path where it doesn't matter to be a star or not a star, but you want to support your living at least, but you're up to on a vocation side, and you can spin that down in many, many different ways, where the answer lies within you first, what you really enjoy doing, what you really on a purpose path, rather than just having a job, or father being a doctor, in my case, and asking me, hey son, maybe you want to study medicine, and said no, because you are the doctor, I'm not the doctor, I don't have a vocation to be a doctor, and so that's the part where things are different. So it's not a fundamental change. It's not saying, I live everything else, but the origin has to come from you and what you actually want to resolve for.
Absolutely. So that brings me to the 7 steps to align purpose with profession. Can you tell us a few important ones so that people can learn it straight away from you?
Yeah, it's a great comment. So the 7 steps, I evolved them empirically by talking to younger generations or accomplished people and helping them. And then they said, Florian, it helped me a lot. Why don't you write it down? So that's when I formalized it into more a didactical approach and wrote it in a book, because they asked me, if you write it in a book, you can reach more people. It wasn't that I wanted to write a book. I was seeing myself as an author, but it's really something I care about. So the 7 steps are basically that two groups. There's a first 4 steps, which is for you to get ready to start vocating. The next 3 steps are for you to stay on course and course correct and measure where you are, once you are vocating. Yeah, you're not to derail, you're not a mission drift, because things might become tough. So I give some tools for the perseverance and the stamina. But again, it has to come from you first, and it's something greater than you. So you're not feeding primarily your ego of being successful. You're actually understanding what you want to resolve for. So that's an important one. And that brings us to the first step. For you to discover your vocation, you need to cut out the noise. You need to cut out the noise, cut out the opinion, and listen to yourself. And you can do this with mindfulness. You can do this with sports. You can do this. You go somewhere contemplating, but you need to spend time with you. Cut out the noise, just saying, what is it, what I really care for? And once you have found that, then you develop the theory of change, what you can actually do with what you care about. Then you go into sectors and communities, and then you build your business plan. So those are the first 4 steps for you to start what I call vocating. And the other 3 is really to make sure, because I had the same myself. Sometimes you have this beautiful offer coming, very juicy, very financially, very ego-driven, an amazing job opportunity or a business opportunity, and you then have to ask yourself, sorry, is this for me? I'm doing this to feed my ego, and to be successful financially or from an image perspective? Or is it that I'm true to myself, to my North Star, and the North Star being, the which guides me to the path of my purpose? And that's something which life throws curveballs at you. And that's something you need to then correct course. But the 7 steps are made in a way, they don't have to go exactly one after the other. Some people know their vocation, and then they get some ideas of how to actually start vocating. Some people are like you're asking, saying, okay, I have a skill set, I have a business, I have a job, I've studied something. How can I now look into my vocation and match both of them? That was part recently. For example, I did a workshop an on-vocation workshop at the Oxford University with MBA students. And that was one of the questions, saying, hey, I've studied so hard to learn financial modeling. AI will be better than I will always be. So I have no future with financial modeling because AI will do the job. And that's when I said, hold a second, what is your cause? What is something you really, when you're younger, what you want to resolve for? And he said, oh, look, for me, it is nature. And for me, it is the climate change. The climate is changing. So mankind needs to adapt to it. So that adaptation is something I care about. I said, okay, wonderful. Now you take your superpower of being good in financials and being educated. You use the climate mitigation and put both of them together. And suddenly you can go into the insurance industry. You need people exactly with your motivation of vocation and your skill set. You can go in a corporation, you can go in a business, you can create a business, you can do a startup, whatever it is, with the two skill sets together, which is your superpower, I call it, and your calling, the vocation.
Absolutely. Talking of vocation and the education system, you talk about it, vocation as the absent subject. Why education must include vocation in the AI era? How do you and why do you connect it with the AI? Do you think that humans will be left with nothing to do and that vocation is the only thing that will take them forward?
I like your provocative question, AJ. That's a good one. But the point is the following. In the past, only privileged people could create certain things. Privilege means you have an education and you have a money to do something. Now, technology has two blessings. It's the access and affordability. And AI even lowers the threshold. Yeah, what you need is energy and an internet connection and no education at all, because everything is there and people can start to innovate. So the threshold to create something is much lower. So in the past, maybe you would have an idea and I want to create a new business, I have a new thought, and this would take a long time. And then my value was gathering of knowledge and information myself. But the gathering of that is done by AI much faster. So you need to shift in saying, if I want to compete with AI to say I'm smarter than AI, you will lose the game. But if I want to leverage AI to create something, it has never been as fast and as easy as cheap, and it will be cheap and faster and faster. And that opens up a huge segue for people to actually create and resolve for. So if you get understanding that you can really take your vocation and build a business out of that, because this is where you create and innovate, and you leverage the technology to do so, you are up to probably much higher success rate than rather just for you to defend that you are in a service industry and that you're better than the machine, because your customer loves you and you will do a better job. And this is where things change. Yeah. And so this is where from someone doing accounting might come up with a new accounting methodology, and make it more accessible and look at economic empowerment rather than just in the past doing a translation of values to values in a spreadsheet, because that was AI does. And that's where I invite people. Yes, AI has risks, huge risks for humanity, warfare, mass manipulation, mental health, a big problem. But if you keep it to the people to own what I actually care about, what I long for, you can leverage the technology to create faster, cheaper, and better than before.
Absolutely. This brings me to your book, On Vocation, How to Align Your Purpose with Your Profession. So who is this book for? Is it only for the common man, or is it also for those people who have got lots of investments in other areas, but not as impact investor? Those people are only, focused on money. Those people can be great impact investors, but are not. Help us understand this part of your book.
Yeah, it's a great question. So probably the intention of the first book is to align purpose with the profession. Ideally goes for younger generations. But it's not only, because you have accomplished people who said, I ran a company, I sold a company, I had a big job, I'm now looking at, I've done economically very well, but now the question is, how do I take this forward? And this is where to align your purpose with a job or profession, what you do, your work, applies to anyone. And by the way, it applies to privileged people, but also underprivileged people. Yeah, because you can, in today's world, using technology, really, really do transformative things. So that's one side. Now, that's why I'm talking about the trilogy of 3 books. Because in the first book, I talk vulnerable about my own story, my learning. Then I put a lot of the science into the science of vocating, I call it, data, methodology, books, and science into it, so that people understand that this is not just because I say, that there's actually, it's substantiated, and then there come the 7 steps. Now, this is about an individual person. The second book, which I'm just finalizing, is to put it in the context of an organization, of a business. I tell my story again, because I've done a lot of things over the years in different ways, at corporate, at smaller, at startups, and these things, where I put this in. Then the science of vocating and the 7 steps in a relation of an organization. So people working with each other. Yeah. So you can do more than just one, because having the individual. And the third one is then, AG, what you mentioned is actually how to leverage capital, money, wealth to leave a greater good, the intention, which ends up in impact investing, what I do today. That will be the third book. But the principles are the same, the steps are the same, just the context changes. So one of the big topics with companies is actually to rephrase. A company does what it's doing. You don't want to stop a company doing what it does. But if you rephrase the core values of a company, you have, instead of a shareholder value, a stakeholder value. And if this is then commonly embraced, your net promoter score goes very high. Yeah, because people are really proud. Yeah, so I gave this example as an apparel industry, and you can have an outdoor apparel industry. You have several brands that are really good and sexy and wonderful and useful, and you come to the mountains, and whatever weather conditions you're out there because you love nature, or you can do what Patagonia did. Yeah, it's a stakeholder view. It's beyond just the apparel piece, and that has not only that the clients would adhere to and buy that one, but also the people involved, the suppliers, everyone has a greater picture, which doesn't mean you need to do what Patagonia does to create, to give it into a trust, yeah, and then have the benefits shared. There are many other ways of how you can contribute, but that's an example how you do it in an organization, and you can do the same with money. For-profit, non-for-profit, or all the different shades of gray in between. That's what actually my job is, my company does with Human Planet. Yeah, when we really look into the intentionality of capital and the addition of the capital. But the book takes you stepwise from 1, 2nd, and 3rd edition in order to use the tools to do something about it, which is very important for me.
Absolutely. There is much to understand about all this from you, Florian, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more from you, what you are doing, about your impact investing, and also about your book. What's the best way for them to do so?
Yes, my webpage is called www.on-vocation.com. And there you can reach out to me, contact me. You can see also the book, the first book published now. The others will show up there. So that's the easiest way to learn more. I have a lot of my articles also cited there, literature, the type of workshops I've been doing. Again, that's where can people reach out to.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.